The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. Gold clasped the rope ladder and lifted himself onto the first rung. "Fair's fair," he said stubbornly. However, as he started to climb, his resolve lessened as a weight of guilt grew in his stomach. With each rung, it became greater, until the feeling of conviction weighed him down like a lead brick. "What is going on here?" he wondered, gritting his teeth in vexation. He reached automatically for the next rung, but his hand stopped in the air, frozen. Spirit's voice came once more, not in his ears, but in his memory. "Gold," she had said, "you have to forgive him." He was almost out. A few more rungs, and he would be over the stony wall, clear of the well, back in sunlight. Then he could run back into town, find the rough equivalent of the sheriff, and send them to assist Kurt. Team Rocket would be placed under arrest, and that one, probably dead, grunt would be lifted out before his body could decompose and leave a ghastly stench. He would probably be buried in an unmarked grave, unless he was claimed by a near relation. That was, if he had any family that still remembered him. Ah! With a shout of frustration, Gold scrambled down the rope ladder again, reaching the well's bottom in seconds. His arms ached, and he was out of breath as he once more stood over the fallen rocket grunt. "God! Why?" he cried through his clenched teeth, stiffening his shoulders and balling his fists. "I let Cyndaquil die, and I buried him! He was innocent! But this man? Why should he get another shot? The world is better off without people like him!" "His name is Tom," came a still, small voice from somewhere. It was like Spirit's, yet unlike, and Gold could not determine its source. There was no mistaking it, though. To leave now, when he had the power to revive this fallen man, would be a decision that he would never live down. Nevertheless, it was his to make. The rocket grunt lay on his stomach, his back upward. Breathing hard, sweat sliding down his forehead, Gold knelt beside him. Very slowly, he reached out, and his hand touched upon the fallen man's shoulder. Immediately, Gold felt a plunging sensation, as if the earth around him was suddenly water, and he was sinking rapidly through it. Dirt and stone sped past him, all around him, as he fell like lightning through a terrestrial vortex. What he experienced next was similar to the oblivion following his poisoning at Proton's hands. Similar, in the sense that he remembered nothing at the time, and only a smattering of images and sensations thereafter. There was suddenly fire everywhere, terrible and all-consuming. It was not at all like Spirit's gentle flames, which emanated life and comfort. It tore at Gold like a billion ravenous ants, inflicting agony so severe that it blinded him. The heat was beyond unbearable, and whenever Gold thought of it afterward, he wondered how he had felt it and lived to remember. Here was a place devoid of life, yet somehow it could still support human consciousness. All he knew was pain and terror. Then something else entered his awareness, though he could not properly see it. Rather, it was an impression he had, brought on by a sixth sense, the only one not swallowed in the torment of the fire. Later on, in trying to describe it, Gold found himself forced to use physical terms, though they were hopelessly inaccurate. He perceived a slashing and the image of a severed animal's tail. It was held aloft as it continued twitching by a single fleshless hand. Gold could not make out the rest of the entity that held the tail, but somehow he knew that it was far, far greater than his temporal mind could behold. All the while, he had been oppressed by a dread that surpassed any fear he would ever again know. It was enough to kill him if the heat did not, and its proper memory was mercifully driven from his mind. The source of the terror, however, was not this torturous place and its hellish flames. It was not even the entity with the skeletal hand. It was the weapon that this thing held. Again, words failed Gold when he tried to recall it. The closest image he could render was a scythe blade, stretching eternally out from the point of its handle. The blade was not made of metal. It was comprised of darkness, true darkness, outermost darkness that had endured from time's beginning, when God first allowed light to be. Gold knew that he would rather continue burning in the flames for all eternity than be touched by that scythe and be cast to the outer darkness. Suddenly, he was directly behind the rocket grunt called Tom, standing in the same posture that he had been when he touched the man's shoulder. Flames still surrounded him, and the outer darkness yawned eternally before him, but he realized that he had experienced everything through Tom's perspective. He was back in control. I can still do something, thought Gold. I have the ability. He tightened his grip on Tom's shoulder and pulled with all his will. Come back, Tom! Come back! Then, as if no time had passed at all, Gold was back at the bottom of the well, yanking on the rocket grunt's shoulder with enough force to flip his body completely over. As soon as Tom's back thudded upon the ground, he came to life with a soulful gasp. His body seized up, and he twisted himself at once into a quivering fetal position. The hyperventilation that followed was so rapid and erratic that Gold feared the poor wretch would pass out. He didn't need to see the look on Tom's face to know that the man was traumatized. Their experience had been mutually horrific. He himself was barely in better shape.